Mayor Prince is with us. Good morning, sir.
Hey, good morning. How are you guys doing today?
Probably better than you.
Not trying to be as busy as you.
Well, always lots of stuff going on in the city and in life in general. And I'm looking out your window here as we're talking, and is it fall?
Right.
I don't know. There's a bunch of brown leaves over there. I don't know.
Thanks.
It's kind of cold.
Trees are starting to turn. It seems early.
Those are downed ones. We had a storm back in June.
True.
Yeah, I might have heard about that.
Speaking of which, we're getting close to budget time. Figuring that out for the upcoming year. Every government entity, every business, every family, at least you hope, has a contingency plan, an emergency fund. You guys had to use most of yours.
Yeah, we did.
Is that a rule or a policy?
So our standard city policy for a good number of years, and we were actually trying to find out how far back, but we couldn't, is that we will maintain 50% of our general budget in reserve. So what that means is if we're slotted to spend $16 million out of the general budget in a given year, we're going to keep $8 million in reserve. And that's a reserve that's built up over time. So going into the storm, our reserve was $8.8 million. That's what we had set aside for, unplanned things.
Dang. Good thing, huh?
Some people will say, wow, that's an awful lot. Some people will say, yeah, but that can be gone in the blink of an eye.
Right.
What is your inkling as to what this council will do as far as what that number will be going forward?
Well, I think our goal is to refill the reserve and get to that point again. So right now we're anticipating the city's out-of-pocket expenses due to the storm to be somewhere between $1.5 and $2 million. So if we had 8.8, when all the dust settles, we'll have 6.8, say if it's $2 million. And then you have to think about how to replenish that $2 million. So we just had a work session on the budget and the levy this last Monday, and that was part of the conversation. How do you replenish the levy? Replenish the reserve. And my point of view on it has been, let's see if we can get creative and pull dollars from other sources so that we don't have to put that on top of the levy. So one of the conversations that was part of that discussion was liquor fund reserves. Right now we have $2 million of undesignated liquor store reserves. We could potentially move $1 million of that, let's say, over to the general reserve, and then we'd, chew up half of that deficit. That's a possibility. We also could say in the future, we won't use liquor store profits or anything else until the reserve is fully replenished. That's another thought, to do it over time. We also have the ability to shuffle some money around through land sales. Now, the charter and our governing documents don't allow the city just to take land sale dollars and move them right over to the reserve, because you have to use those for capital expenditures. But you could use those land sales to fill in some capital expenditures and then use the savings from the capital expenditures that you're not spending to move over to the reserve. So these are some of the creative ways that, council's been talking about. How can we do this without saying, hey, we're going to add $2 million to the levy just so we can fill that back up? But to your point, we need to get that back in a good shape, because the reason we're talking about a $2 million hole right now potentially is because we were able to get 75% reimbursement from the state disaster fund. If we hadn't been able to do that, then that $2 million would turn into $6, $7, $8 million, and then that would have been the reserve. So, those are the things that, when you have that set aside for things that you can't expect, you can't ever just say, well, that's a lot of money. You don't know what that disaster is.
True.
Two questions come to mind with what you just said. First one, $1 million liquor store reserve fund seems kind of high. What is that money used for?
So that money is used to buy down the levy over time. It's also used for parks and rec related things, and occasionally it's used for special projects.
So it's money from the liquor store, not for the liquor store.
No.
Gotcha.
And there's a certain amount. I think the total reserve at the liquor store is like 1.8, but 600,000 of it is designated as it can't be spent out because it is for some of those things that you're talking about. But the 1.2 is free, and that's been cumulative profits year after year after year that have been stored up, as I understand it. That predate me. We've obviously added to it over the last 5 years, but it's been cumulative.
Okay, next one. How long will it be before we start seeing state money?
I think we're pretty close to that. The whole goal is to work through the process and understand how you get reimbursed, because basically the county's getting reimbursed from that fund, and then we're getting reimbursed by the county, as I understand that. And then also it's making sure that everything that is submitted is allowable. So that's why we don't know for sure if our deficit's going to be 1.5 or 2, or I should say our share of those costs, because we don't know if everything that we've done will be covered. And it's not so dissimilar from a homeowner's insurance policy, right? If a tree fell on your house, removing that tree, taking care of your house gets covered. If 12 trees fell on your lawn, depending on your policy, it could look entirely different.
Right.
So I think that's what staff is doing right now, is just verifying what expenses can we submit, what qualifies, what doesn't, what's the mechanics to get reimbursement. The good news is, we're sitting on a pretty good amount of money, so we're able to front some of that until we get it back. So we're not in any immediate cash crisis, but I would like it back sooner rather than later.
You're still cash flowing a lot.
Yes, we are. The other good news is, of course, we had pretty good insurance policies.
Oh, good.
So, we're doing like $4.5 million worth of work over at the Sanford Center. Our deductible for this entire claim for everything that was damaged in the city was $5,000.
Are you kidding me?
No,
Nice.
no, and that's part of being part of the League of Minnesota Cities Insurance Trust,
Okay.
which is a little different than a privately held insurance company. So all of that's getting taken care of through insurance proceeds. But when we're rolling around with the trucks and doing 3 rounds of cleanup and curbside pickup and those kinds of things, a good hunk of that isn't going to be insurance.
Right.
Certain things to clear out roadways and things like that, you might get some coverage. But, just stepping in to help your citizens out, there's not a lot of insurance companies looking to help you with that.
But getting rid of a tinderbox in future years, and not having a bunch of dead trees laying around.
I'm not going to argue the logic. I'm just going to say the policies are
Cost
the
money.
policies.
Right? I appreciate it.
Yeah, so.
City Northern Townships legal, how do I say this down the middle, issues continue. You guys had a joint meeting. Northern Township will have their own. The city will have your own. Are you anticipating this still being wrapped up this fall?
Yeah, everything I've heard indicates that. The meeting we had here a couple weeks ago was informational. So the judge wasn't present. It was the township board, the city council, our experts, their attorneys, our attorneys, and the public. And we had, a couple hundred people turn out and asking good questions of both sides. I thought we got through that meeting pretty good. Tried to get as much information out there as possible from both points of view. And that meeting is required as part of the legal process. So that's why that occurred. There will be a hearing in Northern Township at the end of September for people who want to offer testimony, etc., and have their views made known, and the judge will be present at that. And then in October, the same thing will happen at the city, and the judge will be present there as well. So those 2 hearings are a little bit different because the judge is there. As I understand it, the judge is presiding, and so it'll be a little bit different. There'll be all kinds of testimony offered by experts and people who are called and all of that kind of stuff. And we think that's going to wrap up in October, and I would expect a verdict sometime in November or December. That's at the judge's discretion, obviously, but I would think that if it goes all the way, that's what it would look like. Now, we as a city did make a settlement offer to the township at the end of our meeting, our joint informational meeting. I haven't officially heard back what the township's response to that is, but speaking for myself, I continue to hope that there is some settlement here because I still think that's the best way forward. But if not, I think we'll go and see how this all shakes out. And although I'm not excited about how we all got here, I don't know that anybody who's in the middle of this is. But this is an issue that our community has been debating for at least 60 years. And the one thing that will come out of all of this, no matter how it concludes, is the
Need some finality, yeah.
and some resolution. And again, not that I want resolution that way, but I do think at a minimum we'll know how we're going to move forward with the lake. And for our entire community, that is important.
Safe for me to assume that the average Bemidji resident maybe leans one way or the other, but could be swayed perhaps the other direction, that they're pretty much, yeah, whatever. But that the average Northern Township resident is either hard fought for or hard fought against.
I think it depends on who you talk to. So there are people in Northern Township in the affected area around the lake who have very strong opinions about what they want to do. I hear from a number of them. And those folks are being put in an interesting position because I think all of them would prefer to stay in Northern Township. However, if you're going to present them with the choice of the city of Northern or the city of Bemidji, that's a different equation for them, you know? And so they're the ones who will be the most affected about what happens here. So if you live in another part of Northern Township and you're not going to be assessed or have your property disturbed or any of those things, it's a little bit easier, if you will, to have an opinion about things than if you're in the affected area, one direction or the other, because you're not being impacted the same way. I would say the same thing about a city resident. You might have an opinion, but you're not necessarily in the affected area, so it's going to be a little different for you to have an opinion. I will say, you know, from the city's perspective, there's a lot that goes into this decision that goes beyond preserving Lake Bemidji as far as just real consequences. When a city gets established next to you, the border is set and you will never expand beyond that, which means you won't grow that direction. So that's a reality of what would happen if the township incorporates. I'm not here to say that's a motivation for anything, just that's a reality. So as a city resident, you got to know that if this were to happen, that's part of the game. You know, so a lot of things that are going to potentially happen here when it's all said and done.
Let your voice be heard, people.
Yeah, and this is a great opportunity, exactly, to come out, whether it's the Northern Township hearing or the City of Bemidji hearing. Come have your opinion heard. That's why those hearings are there.
Perfect. Mayor, thanks for stopping by.
Absolutely. Always appreciate the time to catch up. And I will say I caught a little bit of your previous conversation while I was out waiting, and some really heavy stuff there.
Isn't it?
It's really, really sad when you wake up in the morning or you're in the middle of the day or wherever it is and you're reading and hearing that children are getting killed, or somebody's getting stabbed to death minding their own business on a train.
Right.
And you could just go down the list. And, I know there's a lot of different opinions about all of this, but I think the one thing we can all agree on is that we don't want to see people die needlessly. And there's a lot of different ideas about how to get there and how to prevent that. But if there's one thing I think we all have in common, we don't like to see that stuff, and we don't ever want to see it again anywhere. That's just a fact. So relatively speaking, whatever we got going on at the city, fortunately, we've not had to wrestle with something like that, and I'm really grateful.
Perfect. Well, thanks for stopping by. We'll see you next month.
You bet. You guys have a great day.